It was the late 1800s in a small, dusty town in the American West. The sun beat down on the dry earth, making everything look faded and tired. The air smelled of heat and dirt. Samuel Collins, a poor farmer, had lived here for as long as he could remember. But these days things weren't going well. His crops had failed. His cattle were sick. His small plot of land, which had once been full of hope, was now almost worthless. Every morning he woke up with a sinking feeling, knowing that his farm was on the verge of being taken away. Samuel had always worked hard. He'd plowed the fields from dawn to dusk, but now it seemed like everything he did was in vain. His debts piled up and there was no way to pay them. People in town whispered about him behind his back, calling him unlucky, a man doomed by fate. He didn't mind the whispers. He was used to them. But what hurt the most was the thought of losing the farm that had been in his family for generations. He felt as if he had no choice but to attend the auction that was being held in the town square. It was his last hope. The auction was busy like it always was. Farmers, traders, and townsfolk gathered, hoping to get something they could use. Samuel walked slowly, his boots kicking up dust as he made his way toward the crowd. His heart pounded in his chest. He didn't have much money left, but he knew he had to try. Maybe, just maybe, there was something here that could help him save the farm. He found a spot near the front of the crowd. The auctioneer, a loud man with a thick mustache, stood at a wooden podium ready to begin. He called the crowd to attention, his voice booming across the square. Samuel tried to focus, ignoring the bitter taste of fear that lingered in his mouth. "Next up," the auctioneer called. "A special offering today, folks. A young Apache girl orphaned in a recent raid. No family left to claim her, so she's been brought here for sale." A shiver ran down Samuel's spine as a girl was brought forward. She couldn't have been more than 12 or 13 years old. Her face was pale and her long dark hair was tangled, falling messily around her shoulders. Her eyes, though, were what struck Samuel the most. They were sharp, filled with a mixture of fear and defiance. She didn't look like someone who had just been through something terrible. She looked like someone who had lived through many battles, someone who could survive anything. "Here she is," the auctioneer continued, gesturing to the girl. "A strong, healthy girl. She can work on a farm or in a home, whatever you need. A bargain for the price, I'd say." The girl didn't move. She just stood there, her head lowered, her eyes fixed on the ground. Samuel felt a strange pull in his chest. He didn't know why, but something about her made him want to help. He wasn't sure if he had the courage to do anything, but he couldn't just stand there and let this girl be sold to the highest bidder like a piece of livestock. The auctioneer raised his gavel. "Who will start the bidding?" $50. $100? The crowd began to murmur and Samuel's thoughts raced.
He had no money.
Not enough to buy land, not enough to buy anything of real value, but he felt a sudden urge to step forward. His hand shook as he reached into his pocket and pulled out the last of his coins. He had just $1 left. "I'll offer $1, Samuel said, his voice low but firm. The crowd fell silent. Samuel could feel their eyes on him, wondering if he was joking. $1? It was barely enough to buy a loaf of bread. The auctioneer raised an eyebrow, looking at Samuel in surprise. "You'll offer $1? The auctioneer asked, a bit of disbelief in his voice. Samuel nodded. "Yes, $1. The crowd laughed, some shaking their heads in amusement. But the auctioneer, looking at the girl with a bit of pity, shrugged. "Well, it's a deal, I suppose," he said with a wave of his hand. $1 for the girl. The girl's eyes lifted just a little, and for a moment they locked with Samuel's. He wasn't sure if she was thankful or confused. Either way, he felt something stir within him. The auctioneer handed over the girl to Samuel, who reached into his pocket, pulling out the last of his coins. The townsfolk continued to stare as Samuel walked away with the girl by his side. He didn't know what to expect, but he couldn't help feeling that somehow he had just made the most important decision of his life. As they walked away from the square, the girl remained silent. Samuel didn't know what to say to her, but he wasn't used to talking much. He wasn't sure what her life had been like or what her future held, but he knew he couldn't leave her to be treated like property. "Come with me," Samuel said, trying to sound comforting. "I'll give you a place to stay, a roof over your head. I can't promise much, but it's better than nothing." The girl didn't reply. She simply followed him, her steps slow and cautious. They made their way to the farm on the edge of town. Samuel's heart was heavy with worry. He had no idea what to expect or what the future would hold for them both. But as the sun dipped behind the mountains, he had a strange feeling that this wasn't the end, but the beginning of something much bigger. The days after Samuel bought Ayanna from the auction were quiet and filled with uncertainty. The town had seen what happened, and Samuel knew that people would be talking. They always did. He had never expected to be the center of attention, and now it seemed like everyone had an opinion about his decision. Samuel had always been a man of few words. He was used to working the land alone, quietly going about his day with only the sound of his plow and the wind to keep him company. But now he found himself trying to make conversation with a girl who said nothing at all. Ayanna's silence was almost deafening, and Samuel wasn't sure how to break it. She would only speak when it was absolutely necessary, and even then her words were few and careful. The first few days on the farm were tense. Samuel didn't know how to approach Ayanna. He had brought her here thinking that he could somehow help her, but now that she was in his home, he wasn't sure how to take care of her. He had never raised a child before, let alone an Apache girl, and he had no idea what customs or needs she might have. Ayanna spent most of her time sitting by the small window in the house, staring out at the fields. Her eyes were distant, as though she was watching something far beyond the horizon. Samuel noticed that sometimes she would even step outside, just to stand there looking off into the distance. At first, Samuel thought she might be homesick, longing for her family or the land she had once known. But there was something more to her silence, something deeper. It was as if she was waiting for something that Samuel couldn't see. On the fourth day, Samuel decided to try to make her feel more at home. He took her out to the fields and showed her how to plant the crops. It wasn't much, just some corn and beans, but it was all he had. "These are the seeds," he said, handing her a small packet. "You bury them in the ground like this," he demonstrated, placing a seed in the soil and covering it with dirt. "And you wait. You water them every day, and eventually they'll grow. You take care of them, and they'll take care of you." Ayanna watched him silently, her eyes studying every move. When Samuel looked up, he saw that she was watching him with a kind of focus he had never seen in anyone before. It was like she was absorbing every word, every action. She took the packet of seeds from him without a word and knelt down beside him. Her movements were graceful, almost like a dancer, and she carefully planted the seeds exactly as Samuel had shown her. She didn't make a sound, but Samuel could tell she was paying attention. It was the first time she had engaged in something since arriving. The days passed, and Ayanna slowly became more involved in the work around the farm. She helped Samuel feed the chickens and tended to the small vegetable garden near the house. Despite the quiet, Samuel noticed changes in her. She was strong, much stronger than he had expected. Her hands were skilled, and she had a natural understanding of the land. Her movements were purposeful, and she worked with a quiet determination. Though she still didn't speak much, Samuel began to feel a strange connection to her. She was unlike anyone he had ever known. She wasn't afraid of hard work, and she didn't complain. There was a certain peace about her that Samuel admired. In a way, her silence was comforting, like the calm of the earth before a storm, but at the same time it worried him. What was she thinking? What was she hiding? One evening, as Samuel sat on the porch after a long day's work, Ayanna came outside and stood beside him. She didn't sit. She just stood there looking at the sky, her gaze distant again. Samuel had grown used to her quiet ways, but this time something felt different. There was a sense of tension in the air. "Are you all right?" Samuel asked softly. It was the first time he had asked her a question without expecting an answer. He didn't expect her to say anything, but it felt right to ask. Ayanna didn't answer right away. She stood still for a moment, then finally turned to him. Her eyes locked with his for the first time in days, and for a brief moment, Samuel saw something in her eyes that took him by surprise. It wasn't fear or sadness, but something deeper, something that reminded him of the land itself. Wild, untamed, full of mystery. It was a look he couldn't quite place, but he knew it was important. I'm not from here," Ayanna said quietly, her voice almost a whisper. "I am from the mountains. From my people." Samuel's heart skipped a beat. He had known that Ayanna wasn't just any girl, but hearing her speak about her past made it feel real in a way that nothing else had. "Where are your people now?" Samuel asked, his voice gentle. Ayanna's eyes lowered, and she shook her head. "Gone," she said softly. "They are gone. My family, my village, all gone." Samuel's heart went out to her. He knew that the Apache people had been pushed off their land, driven into the mountains and deserts by settlers like himself. He didn't know the details of Ayana's past, but he knew enough to understand that she had lost everything: her family, her home, her way of life. "I'm sorry," Samuel said, his voice thick with sympathy. Ayana didn't respond. Instead, she looked up at the sky again, her gaze far away. Samuel followed her gaze, staring up at the endless stars. It was quiet, peaceful. But Ayana wasn't at peace. Samuel didn't know how to help her, but he knew that he had to try. He had taken her in, given her a place to stay, but now he realized that what she needed wasn't just a roof over her head. She needed answers. She needed closure. "Is there anything I can do for you?" Samuel asked gently. Ayana turned to look at him, her expression unreadable. "You have done enough," she said, her voice soft but steady. "But I must find my way. I must find my people." The words hung in the air, and Samuel knew that Ayana wasn't just talking about finding her family. She was talking about something deeper, a part of her that had been lost, a part of her that couldn't be healed by simply working the land or offering food and shelter. Samuel nodded slowly. He didn't know what Ayana's future held, but he knew one thing for sure: he couldn't let her face it alone. The sun had been setting for hours when Samuel first noticed something strange. It was late in the fall and the days were growing shorter, colder. Ayana had been working hard just as she always did. There was no sign that she was slowing down, no indication that the weight of her past was bothering her, at least not in the way Samuel could see. She had become part of the rhythm of the farm, working beside him day after day. But there were still moments when her silence seemed louder than everything around them. It was one of those moments that evening when Samuel noticed the marks on Ayana's back. They were hidden under her simple shirt, but when she had bent over to pull weeds from the vegetable garden, the edge of her shirt had lifted slightly, revealing something he hadn't seen before. There, on the small of her back, were symbols, strange curved shapes etched into her skin. They were unlike anything Samuel had ever seen. He stood still for a moment, unsure of what he was looking at. It wasn't until Ayana straightened up that he realized what he had glimpsed. She quickly pulled her shirt down, covering the marks again, but the sight had already been imprinted in his mind. For days, Samuel couldn't stop thinking about those symbols. What were they? Why were they there? And more importantly, why hadn't Ayana ever spoken about them? Samuel had come to care for her, and the mystery of her past seemed to grow deeper with every passing day. He decided that he had to ask her about it, though it had never been easy for him to start a conversation, especially with someone who remained so quiet. He knew it was the right thing to do. That evening, as they were sitting by the fire inside their small cabin, Samuel turned to Ayana. The firelight flickered against the walls, casting long shadows across the room. He hesitated for a moment, his eyes falling to his hands, unsure of how to begin. "Ayana," he said quietly, "I saw something today. On your back." "The marks." Ayana didn't respond right away. She simply stared into the fire, her face unreadable. Samuel waited, feeling a lump form in his throat. Maybe he had crossed a line, asked too much. After what felt like an eternity, Ayana spoke, her voice soft but steady. "They are part of me," she said, her words careful. "Part of my people." Samuel leaned forward slightly. "What do they mean?" he asked. "What are they?" Ayana finally turned to face him. Her eyes, usually so calm and distant, were now filled with something deeper, something Samuel hadn't seen before. There was a heaviness in her gaze, a mixture of fear and sadness. "They are symbols of my tribe," Ayana began. "Symbols that mark me as someone important. My people, we are not just any tribe. We are the keepers of something very old, very powerful." Samuel listened intently, but his confusion grew. "What do you mean by keepers?" "Keepers of what?" Ayana took a deep breath, and for a moment Samuel thought she might not continue. But she did. "Long ago," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "our people were given a task, a mission. We were chosen to protect a treasure, something that could change the world. The symbols on my back are part of the map that leads to it." Samuel's heart raced as Ayana's words sank in. A treasure? Something that could change the world? The idea seemed almost too impossible to believe, but the seriousness in Ayana's eyes told him that she wasn't lying. "What kind of treasure?" Samuel asked, his voice low with curiosity. Ayana paused, her gaze distant once again. "It is not just gold or jewels," she explained. "It is something far more powerful. Something that our people have protected for generations. The treasure is linked to the land, to nature. It holds the balance of the world, the power to heal or destroy. Samuel stared at her, stunned. He couldn't imagine what Ayanna was describing. A treasure of unimaginable power hidden for centuries. It sounded like something out of a legend, not something that could exist in the real world. "Where is it?" he asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. "Do you know where it is?" Ayanna nodded, but her expression grew darker. "I don't know exactly, but the symbols on my back are a clue. They are part of a map that was passed down through my ancestors. Only someone of my bloodline can follow it." Samuel's mind was racing. This was more than he had ever expected. He had known that Ayanna was special in some way, but he had no idea how deep that specialness ran. This wasn't just a girl who had been sold at an auction. This was a girl with a destiny, one that was tied to something much bigger than either of them. "Ayanna," Samuel said, his voice filled with both concern and awe. "Why didn't you tell me? Why keep this a secret?" Ayanna looked at him, and for the first time he saw a flash of vulnerability in her eyes. "Because I didn't want you to look at me like I was different," she said softly. "I didn't want you to think that I was just some symbol or something to be used." Samuel's heart ached for her. He had never looked at her that way, but he understood why she felt that way. Ayanna had lived through so much, and now it seemed she was carrying the weight of her people's legacy. "I never thought of you like that," Samuel said gently. "I've always seen you as a person, Ayanna. Someone who is strong and kind. But this is a lot to understand, a lot to take in." Ayanna nodded. "I know. I didn't want to bring this burden to you, but now I feel like I can't run from it anymore. The treasure is out there and someone will come for it. They'll come for me." The realization hit Samuel like a wave. People would be looking for Ayanna. People who knew what she was carrying. People who wanted the treasure for themselves. Samuel looked at Ayanna, his face filled with determination. "I won't let anyone take you. I won't let anyone hurt you or use you for what you carry. We'll figure this out together." Ayanna met his gaze, and for the first time she smiled. It was small, but it was real. And in that moment, Samuel knew that their lives would never be the same again. They were no longer just two strangers thrown together by chance. They were now connected by something much deeper, something that neither of them fully understood yet. The journey ahead would be difficult, but Samuel had already made up his mind. He would protect Ayanna at all costs, no matter what came next. The days after Ayanna's revelation passed quickly, but the calmness that Samuel had once enjoyed on his farm was now gone. The secret of Ayanna's heritage and the treasure she guarded could no longer be kept in the shadows. News spread like wildfire through the town, and soon, everyone seemed to have an opinion about Samuel's strange purchase and the mysterious girl living with him. At first, Samuel tried to ignore the whispers. He knew the townspeople were curious, but he wasn't concerned with their opinions. What mattered to him was Ayanna's safety. He had promised to protect her, and now he felt a stronger sense of responsibility than ever. But as the days passed, it became clear that the people in town were starting to take an interest in Ayanna's story. And not all of them had good intentions. One afternoon, as Samuel was working in the field, he noticed a group of men approaching his farm. They were some of the local farmers, and though Samuel had known most of them for years, he could sense that something was different about their visit. There was a tension in the air, a feeling that they weren't just here to talk about crops or livestock. The leader of the group, a tall man named Henry Blake, stepped forward as the others hung back. Henry was well known in town, a man with a reputation for being ambitious and shrewd. He had been one of the first to question Samuel's decision to buy Ayanna at the auction, and now, Samuel could tell that his curiosity had turned into something more. "Samuel," Henry said, his voice cold and calculated, "we need to talk about the girl you've got living here." Samuel looked up from his work, wiping the sweat from his brow. He didn't like the way Henry was talking, but he tried to remain calm. "There's nothing to talk about, Henry. Ayanna is just here to help me with the farm." Henry raised an eyebrow. "Help you with the farm? Come now, you and I both know that's not all she is. Word has gotten around, Samuel. People are talking. They say she's not just some ordinary girl. They say she's part of something much bigger than you or me." Samuel's heart raced. He had been expecting this, but he wasn't sure how to respond. He had kept Ayanna's secret for so long, but now it seemed like the whole town was demanding answers. "She's just a girl who's had a hard life," Samuel said, his voice firm. "She's had enough trouble without people making things worse." But Henry wasn't buying it. "That's not the whole story, is it? People are saying she's from a tribe, one that's got ties to something valuable, something worth more than gold. And I think you know exactly what I'm talking about." Samuel's face hardened. "I don't know what you're talking about. Ayanna is not some treasure hunter. She's just a person, Henry, just like you and me." The other men stood silent, watching the exchange. Samuel could feel their eyes on him, waiting for him to give in. But he wasn't going to. He wouldn't let them twist the truth. Henry stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Look, Samuel, we know you've had a rough time. Your farm is barely hanging on. Maybe, just maybe, this treasure could help. Imagine what it could do for you and for all of us. If we work together, we could find it. We could take it for ourselves." Samuel's blood ran cold at Henry's words. The greed in his voice was unmistakable. "I won't let you use her for your own gain," Samuel said sharply. "She's not some prize to be won. She's a person, and I'll protect her from anyone who tries to take advantage of her." Henry's eyes narrowed. "You're making a mistake, Samuel. People want this treasure, and if you don't help us, they'll come after you. They'll come after her, and you won't be able to stop them." Samuel stood tall, his hands clenched into fists. He wasn't afraid of Henry or his group, but deep down, he knew that the real danger wasn't just in the men standing before him. It was in the growing rumors that had started to spread across the town. People were starting to believe that Ayanna's story was true, and with that belief came the desire to claim the treasure for themselves. "I won't be intimidated," Samuel said firmly. "You can leave now. And if I hear that any of you are threatening Ayanna, I'll make sure you regret it." The men exchanged glances, and Henry seemed to consider Samuel's words for a moment. Finally, he gave a nod, signaling for the group to leave. "Fine, but don't think this is over, Samuel. People will come for her, and when they do, you'll wish you'd listened." With that, the men turned and walked back toward town, leaving Samuel standing in the field, his mind racing. He knew they wouldn't stop here. Henry Blake and the others were only the beginning. If Ayanna's secret got out, the town would turn against her, and there would be no telling who would come to claim what they believed was rightfully theirs. As night fell, Samuel went inside the small cabin. Ayanna was sitting by the fire, her eyes distant as she stared into the flames. When she looked up and saw Samuel, she could tell something was wrong. "Samuel?" she asked quietly. "What happened?" Samuel sat down beside her, trying to calm his racing thoughts. "They know, Ayanna. People in town are starting to believe the rumors. They want the treasure, and they want you to lead them to it." Ayanna's face grew pale and her eyes filled with fear. "I knew this would happen," she whispered. "They'll come after me. They'll try to take it from me. I can't let them." Samuel took her hands in his, trying to offer some comfort. "We'll figure this out, Ayanna. I won't let them hurt you." But even as he spoke the words, Samuel knew that the danger was far from over. The town's curiosity had turned into greed, and soon it wouldn't just be Henry and his men coming for Ayanna. It would be everyone who believed that the treasure was more important than anything else. And Samuel would have to do everything in his power to protect her. The tension in the small town had reached a boiling point. What had once been a quiet, peaceful place now felt like a powder keg waiting to explode. The townspeople's curiosity about Ayanna had quickly transformed into greed, and that greed had drawn the attention of more than just the farmers who had visited Samuel's farm. People from all over the region were starting to talk, and it wasn't long before whispers about the treasure and Ayanna's role in guarding it spread far and wide. Samuel had tried to keep a low profile, hoping the storm would pass. But as the days went by, the threats grew louder. The men from the town had returned several times, each time with more demands and less patience. They wanted Ayanna, they wanted the treasure, and they were willing to do whatever it took to get it. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind the mountains, Samuel sat on the porch of his small farmhouse, his mind heavy with worry. Ayanna had been distant for the past few days, her usual calm demeanor replaced by an anxious restlessness. She hadn't said much, but Samuel could tell that the pressure was getting to her. She knew what was at stake, not just for her but for the people she had once called family. "Ayanna," Samuel said softly, breaking the silence between them. She was standing by the garden, her eyes lost in the horizon. He could see the faint glow of the moon beginning to rise in the sky, but Ayanna seemed to be looking at something far beyond the land, something he couldn't reach. She turned to face him, and for the first time in a while, Samuel saw fear in her eyes. It wasn't the same fear he had seen when she first arrived on the farm. This was different. It was a fear of the unknown, of something she couldn't control. "Samuel," she said, her voice trembling. "They're coming. I can feel it. The people from the town, they won't stop. They won't leave me alone." Samuel stood up, walking over to her. He could see that Ayanna was on the verge of breaking. Her shoulders were tense, her hands clenched into fists. He wanted to reach out and comfort her, but he knew that what she needed was more than just words. She needed a solution. She needed protection. "I won't let them take you, Ayanna," Samuel said firmly, his voice strong. "I promised you I would protect you, and I will." Ayanna shook her head slowly. "You don't understand," she whispered. "It's not just the treasure they want. It's me. I am the key to it. And if I stay here, if I stay with you, they'll never stop coming." Samuel took a step back, his heart sinking as he realized the truth of her words. If Ayanna remained in the town, the dangers would only grow. The men from the town, driven by their greed, would stop at nothing to claim what they believed was rightfully theirs. And Samuel, despite his best efforts, might not be able to protect her forever. He looked at her, his eyes filled with determination. "Then we'll leave. We'll go somewhere they can't find us. I'll keep you safe, Ayanna, I promise." Ayanna shook her head again, this time more forcefully. "No, Samuel. That's not enough. If I keep running, they'll only follow me. I need to make a choice, and I need to make it now." Samuel felt a cold weight settle in his chest. He had never wanted Ayanna to have to make such a choice, but the reality of the situation was clear. If they didn't act soon, it would be too late. "I've known for a long time that I couldn't keep running from my past," Ayanna continued, her voice steady now, though still filled with sorrow. "But I didn't want to involve you. I didn't want to drag you into this war. I was hoping it would go away, that I could stay hidden. But it's too late for that." Samuel's heart ached as he watched her, his mind spinning with the implications of her words. Ayanna wasn't just any girl. She wasn't just someone who had been caught up in something beyond her control. She was the key to something much bigger, something that could change the course of her people's future, and the future of everyone around her. "What are you going to do?" Samuel asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Ayanna closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath as she prepared to speak. "I have to face this," she said softly. "I have to go to the place where the treasure is hidden. I have to destroy the map. If I destroy the map, the treasure will stay hidden. No one will be able to find it, and no one will be able to use it for their own gain." Samuel's heart raced. "But Ayanna, what if it's too dangerous? What if you can't do it alone?" Ayanna turned to him, her eyes fierce with a quiet strength. "I'm not alone. You've been by my side since the beginning. You've protected me, and now I have to protect the world from what's hidden. This is my burden. I have to carry it." Samuel felt a surge of admiration for her. She was brave, far braver than he had ever imagined. She wasn't just the girl he had bought at the auction. She was someone with a purpose, someone with a destiny far beyond the life they had tried to build together, and now she was ready to face the consequences of that destiny. "I won't let you go alone," Samuel said, his voice firm. "I'll go with you. Whatever happens, we'll face it together." Ayanna looked at him, her eyes softening. "You don't have to. You've already done so much for me." But Samuel shook his head. "I'm not leaving you, Ayanna. You've become part of my life. I'll help you destroy the map, no matter the cost." The two of them stood there, the weight of their decision hanging heavily in the air. They knew the path ahead would not be easy. The journey would be dangerous, and they would face many challenges. But they also knew that it was the only way forward. Ayanna had chosen to confront her past, and Samuel had chosen to stand by her no matter what. That night, they packed what little they could carry and made their way to the hidden valley, where the treasure was said to be buried. The journey was long and the nights were cold, but together they pressed on, knowing that they were not just running from their past. They were creating a future where greed and power would no longer have a hold over them. When they finally reached the place where the treasure was hidden, Ayanna took a deep breath, her hand resting on the stone marking the location of the treasure. With a final glance at Samuel, She whispered the words that had been passed down through generations of her people. This is the end. The treasure will stay hidden. And with that, she destroyed the map. The treasure was lost forever, and so was the power it held. But what remained was something far more important: their freedom, their peace, and the knowledge that they had faced the darkness and emerged stronger. Together, Samuel and Ayanna returned to the farm, their journey complete but their bond unbroken.